For the last century, management science followed a single premise. The human being is a volatile component that must be managed by the system. From the early factory floor to modern software sprints, the goal was to mold human behavior to fit the rigid efficiency of the machine. Centralized planners optimized internal variables inside a closed boundary, like a factory or a corporate office. This allowed them to treat the living, physical, and ecological realities of the outside world as externalities, problems that existed off the balance sheet. Today's pursuit of artificial general intelligence is the terminal extension of that same logic. It assumes that if we extract enough data into centralized cloud silos, we can build a machine efficient enough to replace the messy human being entirely. These models focus on infinite compute, while often ignoring the physical constraints of energy shortages and trillion-dollar capital requirements. When digital logic attempts to scale while ignoring the fragmented global substrate it sits on, the resulting friction builds into a thermodynamic crash. Our global infrastructure currently operates on a business-to-everything architecture, where isolated platforms share no temporal baseline. Because these systems are asynchronous, they cannot safely share resources. Instead, they hoard capital, compute, and logistics as a defensive hedge against the friction of the system. This chart shows the cost of that broken architecture. Every year, the global economy bleeds $33.8 trillion in deadweight thermodynamic friction, simply because institutions are fighting the latency of their own systems. When millisecond machine logic collides with 90-day physical logistics, the systems fail to communicate. To bridge this gap, the architecture forces the human being to act as a manual shock absorber, processing the violent friction of failing systems. As documented by Dr. Shoshana Zuboff, this constant cognitive load actively reshapes human psychology. To survive the daily trauma of managing machine friction, people default to fragmented reductionism, hyperfixating on the narrow metrics demanded by the machine. This results in an $8.8 trillion living time crisis. It is a measurable macroeconomic hemorrhage, the literal cost of biological humans burning out while trying to manually synchronize isolated tech platforms. Modular Sovereign Coherence Orchestration, or MSCO, is a 21st century management science that governs the machine to force it into alignment with the living edge. This framework follows the legacy of computing pioneers like Douglas Engelbart. Rather than replacing the human, MSCO focuses on intelligence augmentation, building systems that empower biological nodes to function within their natural context. The system treats reality as an irreducible four-part tetrad. For any transaction to clear, 4 dimensions must mathematically align: cyber capability, physical thermodynamic capacity, social human consent, and sovereign jurisdictional law. MSCO forces these 4 dimensions to synchronize at a legally defined local edge, specifically at the state or provincial level. This map pin represents the exact meso-layer where the financial and physical friction of a system becomes visible and measurable. By anchoring machine logic to this shared biological and jurisdictional consciousness, MSCO prevents algorithmic IP from hallucinating demand in a vacuum. The machine is forced to synchronize with the actual limits of the physical world. MSCO transforms internal management by elevating superficial corporate metrics into the hard-coded physics of the network: privacy, equity, inclusion, and sovereignty, or peace. Anchored in the work of economist Amartya Sen, the network uses PEIS to measure capacity deprivations, the structural inability of a community to access the physical or social resources it needs. The network's primary job is to route capability to resolve these specific, localized gaps. To make this routing possible, MSCO utilizes a temporal synchronization protocol. It actively compresses 90-day physical lags and millisecond machine speeds into a shared, manageable T+15 synchronous state. At this edge, third-party proxies use agnostic surveys to coordinate the synchronization. This creates a methodological airlock, allowing competing platforms to fulfill requests for capability without ever needing to exchange raw corporate secrets or personal data. This enables zero-trust collaboration. Enterprises can resolve localized capacity deprivations and generate yield while remaining protected from sovereign data embargoes and regulatory clawbacks. Isolated platforms currently hoard trillions in reserves to hedge against the friction of an asynchronous market. By establishing the T+15 synchronous state, MSCO removes the underlying latency that makes this defensive hoarding necessary, enabling a transition called sunk cost liquefaction. High-mass tech hubs can safely shed their heavy, depreciating physical liabilities to the localized sovereign edges. This liquefies trapped capital, converting it into kinetic energy that can be used to fund the actual physical restructuring of local communities. As the system begins to manage the machine's friction, the human being is restored to the role of the biological oracle. Freed from manual processing, the human focus shifts back to authoring subjective intent and imagination, the qualities machine logic lacks. This changes the entire role of the C-suite. Rather than managing the trailing losses of data extraction, executives generate continuous algorithmic yield by accurately resolving localized physical realities that were previously invisible to their systems. MSCO uses the localized jurisdictional boundary as a measurement and containment field rather than a wall. It rejects the idea of isolated, self-sustaining states in favor of a network where local modules can safely stack and interact. Based on the thermodynamic proofs of Ilya Prigogine, when these localized modules operate at peak health, they provide the macro intelligence required to dynamically balance global flow. This creates the sensory data needed to reach planetary equilibrium. MSCO acts as the ultimate diagnostic preparation layer, building a coherent socket at the local level. While it achieves T+15 synchronization today, moving the entire planet to absolute T0 execution will eventually require a higher-order supranational coordination blueprint. This framework serves as the definitive first step out of the extractive era. It provides the path to synchronize limitless machine intelligence with the biological and thermodynamic truth of the human edge.